Once upon a time, before they really were certain the earth was round, but long after they believed that it was flat, a monk named Fra Mauro knelt over a parchment circle and charted the whole of the known world. But instead of dragons and blank spaces, he filled it with names and mountains and tangled stories. He didn't just draw places, he drew arguments. He took the map and spun it sideways and dared Europe to imagine the East as not being beneath them, but to the side of them. And the strange thing is that it worked. Now imagine this: a fantasy map that breaks the rules but not at random, one that looks ancient like it was pulled from an ancient sea chest, one that feels vivid and alive, a map that doesn't just show the world, but tells its history in the same ink with which it draws the coastlines. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and today we are diving back into the historical maps series that we're ongoing with. We're talking about, in this episode, Venetian cartography, the maps created in Venice in the 15 and 1600s. We're talking about Fra Mauro's map of the world and how the Mappa Mundi was significant in our understanding of cartography, and how you can create such a map for your D&D world. But more importantly, why? In this series, we've created maps that have explored the line between the living and the dead, that have explored our idea of time and mythology, that have organized the world according to an empire. But this is the first map that prioritizes our understanding of history. The Fra Mauro map and the Mappa Mundi prioritize telling history as well as geography. And we're going to take that trend, that idea, and use it to create a document that is as rich in lore as it is in the geography of our worlds. So by the end of this episode, you'll be able to design a fantasy map that uses visual narrations and marginalia to tell stories. You can choose a symbolic layout for your world, not just north at the top. You can fill the borders and empty spaces with culture and character, not clutter. And you can use historical color palettes and annotation techniques to make the map feel old without losing readability. When we think of medieval or early Renaissance maps, we think of distortions. We think of dragons and large blank spaces. We think of continents being crushed and islands being lost, and a generally misunderstood version of the world. But Venetian maps were different. They were bold arguments. They claimed the right to decide what the world meant. And at the heart of that effort was a city unlike any other, one that seemed to float between worlds, just like the maps that it produced. Because Venice was a gateway between East and West, between North and South. It was where Greek philosophers and Arab astronomers and Latin theologians and merchant gossipers all came together to create this melting pot of culture and understanding and perspective on the world. And in this sort of dense exchange of ideas and perspectives and mythology and history, Venetian cartographers started making maps that didn't just chart the world, they curated a specific view of it. So let's look at three key examples of Venetian map making and how we can use them to create this map. The Fra Mauro map was made in around 1450. This is the crown jewel, the heart of our episode. Created by a Camaldolese monk named Fra Mauro in around 1450, along with a team of advisors, it's a circular Mappa Mundi that stands over 2 meters tall and is crammed to its gilded edges with as much detail and annotation and history as it can possibly put in. It was commissioned by King Alfonso V of Portugal, and today stands in the Biblioteca Nazionale Marchiana in Venice. And what makes this map remarkable isn't just its scale, it's how Fra Mauro reoriented the entire world, because unlike most Christian European maps of the time, he placed the south at the top. And that wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate nod to Islamic and Chinese map-making traditions, a recognition that Europe was not the center of all things. The map includes over 3,000 descriptive notes in flowing script, and they aren't just labels, they're editorial comments. Fra Mauro challenges the ancient Greeks. He cites travelers like Marco Polo. He blends geography with myth, commerce with theology, and rather than just showing a monstrous unknown, his outer margins are thick with detail. Every space tells a story, which is why the map took several years and a whole team to complete. For fantasy maps, this is an extraordinary model because it tells us how we can approach creating a map of the world that doesn't just prioritize the sort of European standard that has continued to the modern day, the idea of north at the top, of orienting around a line that goes straight through Europe. You can create a map that's oriented in whatever direction you like. You can create one which has the history in the margins, that uses a color palette and symbology that represents history and not just mythology, that fills every available space with as much information as you can stick into it so that you have a document that is as much about the lore of your world as its geography. But that's not the only example we're going to be using. Because while Fra Mauro worked in the monastery, Venetian sailors were out at sea drawing something entirely different, something called a Portolan chart. There were very many of them, and they were highly accurate nautical maps based on compass directions and estimated distances, designed for use at sea. One of the earliest surviving examples, the Carta Pisana, which was around 1275, is often attributed to Genoa, but Venice quickly became a major hub for their production. And what's visually striking about these charts is their geometry. They're covered in rhomb lines, this sort of spiderweb-like compass grids that radiate from central points across the page. The precursor to the Mercator map, the rhomb lines allow sailors to chart direct courses between 2 points. And if you've got a map that doesn't take into account the distortion of the world, they are absolutely essential. And on the maps, coastlines are drawn in exacting detail, labeling with place names in tight, neat script. They're often decorative elements like roses or ships or flags, but they never overwhelm the structure. And this balance between form and function is key to the maps. Portolan charts didn't attempt to show the world, they showed the used world, the places that you sailed or traded or fought or returned from. This balance between function and form is key because Portolan charts weren't about mapping the whole world. They were only about mapping the parts of the world you really needed to know. They didn't care about what was inland. They only mapped the coastlines, the ports that you could sail to, and the lines between them. And that's a great perspective to have, particularly if you're creating a map in which you're going to need a lot of space in which to write. And together they form a powerful contrast, one which talks about the world as this sort of big mystery, one that needs to be understood, and one which approaches the world as something that you only really need to deal with on a physical level. So why do these maps matter to us? Because they each show a different purpose behind the same basic tool. Not all maps are made to show where things are. Some are made to show what matters. Others reflect what is known or claimed or imagined. Venetian mapmakers didn't aim for neutral accuracy. They aimed for persuasion, for legacy, for identity. And that's a powerful lesson for fantasy creators. When you want to map your own world, you always think of a neutral map, of a sort of Mercator-style world map in which you can see everything in as neutral an outcome as you possibly can. You talk about the world as this sort of sterile thing of geography, mountain ranges, of cities and roads, of what is there. But if you're creating a fantasy world, think about it in the same way we think about the Portolan charts. It's not necessarily about what is there. It is about what you're going to use. And if you're going to use it to create a world, then you need a map which maps not only the geography, but the history, the lore, the mythology as well. So we have discussed what we're going to be using for inspiration. Let's talk about the method. Now, I've already started putting it together, but I'm going to talk about the step-by-step process of creating this map and what I keep in mind as I do. So I'm going to start with a large piece of A2 watercolor paper, 180 GSM, and I'm going to start with my handy-dandy pencil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to sketch out the continents so that I understand what the layout of the map is like. If you want a video which talks more about how to choose the size of the continents or talking about the different layouts of a world, then I suggest you check out the long form tutorial. The link is above. And as we go through, I've got to decide a lot of the different practical functions of this map. What's the orientation? What's the focus of it? What's the layout of it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a page out of Fra Mauro's book, and I'm going to just dispense with the idea of making a map that is a Mercator map. I'm going to take some ideas from the Portolan charts, and I'm going to make a compass in the center that gives straight lines from Virelin, which is the center of the map, which is the sort of Venice parallel that I'll be talking about. They will give us the straight lines we need. Everything else is going to be distorted. right? It's not super important for us to know where the whole world is accurately. It's important for us to know what Varellin thinks of it. That is the setting that I am theoretically making my D&D campaign in. And the closer things are to Varellin, the less distorted they're going to be. But as we go further and further out, you're going to move throughout the world, which means, of course, that if we think about this world as being a globe, we're not going to have the same layout, the same tidy borders that we do in a Mercator map. It doesn't mean that the top of the map is the Arctic and the bottom of the map is the Antarctic. I'm going to put some references into it later that tell us roughly that there are sections of the map that are Arctic and Antarctic, but otherwise, the direction doesn't really matter. I haven't put a compass rose on here, and I don't think that's particularly significant. What if compasses in this world point to a large lodestone of magnetic material beneath Varellin itself? What is it? What if that is the center of the compass? How can we play with geography and physics in a way that makes our world building interesting? Why is it the center of the world? Okay, so we're going to go through, and after I've done that, I'm going to use some watercolors to do the borders and the outlines of the coast in nice blue. And it's very, very simple at this particular point because I'm going to be prioritizing writing everything out later. But that's step 2. Step 3 is coming in with the Fineliner pen, doing the outline of the coastlines and getting the symbols ready. And that's nice and quick, honestly. The vast majority of my time is going to be spent writing. And you can see that I've chosen some stylistic inputs from the other map. Not only the icons, which are a reference to the Fra Mauro Mappa Mundi, but also the scrolls over the sea that I'm going to be using to talk a little bit more about history. I'm also going to come through and use different colors and sizes of pens to differentiate the information that I've got. So you can see, as I come through and begin labeling, I'm going to be doing the labels of the various countries or continents in the same sort of style as Fra Mauro did. There's no borders. It's just a sort of vague understanding of where things are going to be. I'm going to be doing those in a thicker red pen, which is just a Staedtler 0.4 Fineliner pen. And then I'm going to come in with a thinner burgundy pen for the smaller labels and the discussions of lore within the scrolls on the ocean. And finally, I'm going to be using thinner and thinner black and blue pens for the rivers and the lore dumps. When I go through and begin talking about what is on the map in terms of the notations and the marginalia, I want to create for this particular map an understanding of history that does impact with the mythological. So instead of just saying, this is, the location of this mythical thing, as if dealing with fact, I want to note from the mapmaker's perspective that this is a legend. So if I say legend holds that the Garden of Birth, which is a direct reference to the Garden of Eden, is over here, that is a very different vibe from the mapmaker than simply saying this is where the Garden of Birth is. If I have a story, I will mention that it is a story. If I have a legend, I'll mention that it is a legend. If it's hard historical facts or known knowledge about a people's, then I can deal in specifics and certainty. But otherwise, I want this map to be aware that it doesn't know everything. That's always a great tip for world building. When you create your lore, always give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. If you say legend says that this is the case, then legend absolutely says that. And that could be true or false. You can change your mind later. Because when we're finished, the result is this sort of handcrafted map that deals with the whole history of a world. It doesn't have a timeline on it. It doesn't have anything tidy. But if you want to explore your world, if you want to understand things as a sort of very easy way of keeping everything on one page and thinking, oh, what do I know about this place? What do I know about these people? Then it's absolutely a fantastic tool for doing that. There are no shortcuts here. There's only craft and care and sort of deliberate design. Every scratch of ink, every watery bloom of color adds to the weight of this object. It's more than a map. It's a relic from a world that feels real. So as we come to the end of this, I have a challenge for you. Firstly, let me know what you think of this map. Stick it in the comments below if you like it, what you would kind of write, whether you would prefer a mythological map or this sort of hard storytelling version. Do you think that it's going to be useful for your world? But the real challenge that I have for you as I'm trying to compile maps from viewers that I can reference at the end of episodes. So if you like this style of map, create your own, or even better, create two. because we discussed the difference between the Mappa Mundi of Fra Mauro and the Portolan charts, why don't you create 2 maps of your own world? One which deals with the history and what is known and what is told and the legends, and one which only deals with the practical effects. A static map of the geography and a map of its history. Because then you can use both. You can refer to both in your own worlds and you can compare the two. What's important about your world? And then you can ask yourself, which do you use more often? If you've never made a map, this is an incredible way to start your world building. This form, which doesn't really prioritize which direction you're looking at or where the Arctic is or any distortions, it forces you to think differently. The historical style lends an immediate sense of weight and age to whatever world you're building. So if you do make something, I want to see it, post a photo in the comments, tag the Red Quills on Instagram, share it on the Patreon channel or the Discord. I check every single post, every single time, eventually. So as always, I'm going to be continuing this series of historical maps with one final episode. But if you do want me to talk about particular historical maps, if you want me to talk about styles that you can put in your own world, I have so far discussed Egyptian, Roman, Han Dynasty, Mayan, the Mappa Mundi, and in the next episode I'll be doing a Japanese style map, which I've already finished and it looks so good, guys. It looks so good. Anyway, I'll be discussing that next week. Get ready for that. Tell me how excited you are. Members get access to it as of right now, so if you really want to, you can become a member, but as always, of course, you do not have to. Everything is available for free. If you want to download this map for free on my Patreon, you absolutely can. And if you found this tutorial useful, stick a like below, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you think in the comments below as always. Join the Discord if you want to find a community of like-minded map makers. So as always, thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons who support me, and I will see you next week for the next episode of the Red Quills. See you then. It's the crown jewel of Venetian mapmaking. It's the heart of this episode. It was created by a Camaldolese monk named Fra Mauro.